Hey everyone, my name is Zach. I'm a full-time climbing athlete, and today I'm going to be reviewing the QUBITS by Unparallel. So the first and most obvious impression about these shoes right off the bat is that these are the stiffest shoes by Unparallel that I've tried so far. We have the Flagship Pros being the softest, we have the Tomoe and Alasaki Pros right in the middle, and then these are all the way at the other end of the spectrum, being quite stiff. So while the Tomoe and Alasaki Pros also have a single sole like these QUBITS do, the construction of the shoe, as well as probably just some stiffer rubber, makes for a much harder feeling sole of the shoe and just a lot stiffer in general. So what does that mean about using the QUBITS in comparison to some other models? For starters, it means that these shoes are very, very good for standing on small footholds. You have a nice stiff support base, as well as a very powerful edge, and I always feel really confident when I just have to bear down and wiggle into small foothold, and basically I feel like I'm actually kind of crimping the foothold with my shoe. So in my opinion, these shoes' biggest strengths are for board climbing. If you're someone who climbs on the kilter board a lot, the moon board, I think this shoe would be really good. These shoes would also be great for outdoor bouldering. If I did any of that, I climb outside sort of once in a blue moon, and on the occasional times that I do, I would definitely opt for the QUBIT. And the stiffness also means that they're going to be a pretty good sport climbing shoe, I think, as well, because the idea is with route climbing, you want a stiff shoe that can support your foot throughout climbing a very long route, whereas a soft shoe is going to tire out your foot, and your foot is actually working harder to engage on the footholds with a softer feeling shoe, meaning that it's going to be getting quite tired from doing it all the way up a really long route, whereas a stiffer shoe is going to give your foot a lot more support and tire it out a lot less fast. So while the QUBITS are really great for small footholds and board climbing, outdoor climbing, all these things, the biggest thing I noticed in training in them for the past couple months was that the shoe's biggest weakness is definitely smearing on volumes, which is why it makes it hard for me to fit it in my comp kit, because the Flagship Pros and the Tomoe and Alasaki Pros are quite better for the volumes while maintaining a good enough ability to stand on small footholds. But if we're talking about just standing on small feet, the QUBIT has got the Flagships and the Tomoe's beat in my opinion. But yeah, the lack of volume smearing ability to really, really high levels just means that I'm not gonna compete in them. But what I am gonna do is I'm gonna keep them in my backpack, and anytime I'm climbing on the kilter board or doing a spray wall session, I'll definitely be using these shoes. And of course, the rare occasion when I'm climbing outside. And something quite interesting I noticed about these shoes is oftentimes with shoes on the stiffer end, I find they're not great for sensitivity. I often reference the VSRs when we're doing our shoe reviews, and this is just because I spent a really long time climbing in the VSRs, and they're a pretty common shoe as well, and I feel like a lot of people can relate to wearing the VSRs, as well as myself. So one thing I didn't love about the VSRs was the fact that they weren't so sensitive. I definitely liked the stiffness, but I had to get used to a climbing style where I couldn't really feel the footholds that I was standing on. Now, I would say that these QUBITS are actually similar to the VSRs in a lot of ways. They're stiff, they're bulky, they sort of give you that nice, comfortable, hug your foot feeling that the VSRs are widely loved for. But an extra bonus of these shoes is somehow they're also quite sensitive, and I'm able to feel the footholds that I'm standing on quite effectively, which is different from the VSRs. And in my experience, it's been quite rare and somewhat difficult to find shoes on the hyper stiff end that are also quite sensitive, and this is something that the QUBITS are really great for. Another thing to note about the QUBITS and the edge on the shoe is the fact that I consider these shoes to be a not very pointy shoe. So when we take a look at the edge here, I'd say the Tomoes and the Flagships probably come out to about here, and then as you can see, the QUBITS are about here with the edge. And so what this means is that basically at any given time, the foothold that you're standing on is more directly underneath your toes than a pointier toe shoe, whereas there's a bit more of a gap in the rubber, and your rubber is actually making contact with the wall a bit further out than where your toes actually are. So if you are someone who finds you have confidence standing with a shoe that has you standing like directly on top of a foothold, the QUBITS will be great for you because they are not very pointy and have the foothold resting right underneath your toes when you are stepping on them. And then similar to the other Unparallel models that we have reviewed so far, this shoe also passes all 3 breakage tests, at least Zach's personal breakage tests. Since the heel is fully rubber, There's nothing to sort of rip or peel, as there would be with a shoe that has a bit of felt or a gap in rubber in the middle here. The toe rubber is also constructed very well, and in all my time toe hooking with the shoes, I've been abusing it. I've been toe hooking really sharp surfaces, and I have not been holding back, and the toe rubber has not peeled at all. In addition, it has the same Velcro strap that all of the other Unparallel models that I've tried so far have, and it's a nice thick, heavy-duty Velcro strap that is not going to be going anywhere and has shown no signs of ripping for me in all of my time using the shoe. And when we're talking about the lifespan of the shoe, since this is definitely more of like a heavy-duty, stiffer shoe and is not meant to be a soft, delicate, precise shoe, I find that it means that the lifespan is quite longer. The process of breaking in my QUBITS was definitely a lot longer than the Tomoas and the Flagships, and it probably took me close to 2 weeks for the shoe to be going from brand new to a state that I would compete in the shoe if it was to be my comp shoe, or at least go put it to its maximum test of peak performance. So the longer break-in period and the shoe not being very fragile means that it's gonna last you for a lot longer. And then the last thing to note about the QUBITS, and this is also different from person to person when we're talking about comfort, because we all have differently shaped feet, but I'm someone who found the VSRs to be extremely comfortable, potentially one of the most comfortable shoes I've ever worn, and these feel very similar to that feeling of being nice, bulky, snug, hug my feet, and they feel extremely comfortable. Probably the most comfortable shoes of the Unparallel lineup that I've tried so far, being the Flagship Pros and the Tomoe Narasaki Pros. So yeah, overall, the gist of the QUBITS is that it's a very stiff shoe, really good for board climbing, good for outdoor climbing, good for sport climbing. Its weak point is definitely gonna be smearing on volumes and maybe some other comp style bouldering where sort of torquing and twisting your shoe into various positions is going to be a bit difficult simply because the shoe is so stiff. And the way I'm going to be using the shoe is I'm going to keep it in my backpack. I'm going to be pulling it out every time I climb on the kilter board or the moon board. And yeah, also the style factor is pretty good. I put it at second place in all of the Unparallel shoes after the Flagship Pros. So yeah, those are the QUBITS, and stay tuned for more reviews on other models.